Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Isabella Barriga. I'm an engagement specialist for Global Forest Watch. Today, we're really excited to share a webinar on developing data stories using Global Forest Watch for journalism. And today, we're really pleased to share with you all how you can use Global Forest Watch to visualize forest data and equip you with the evidence and tools to research and communicate the state of deforestation around the world. Whether you're reporting on forest trends and commitments or completing a deforestation investigation or searching for a new story idea, Global Forest Watch can help. We have a fantastic set of speakers lined up today that will share more about how they've used Global Forest Watch for impact in their work. We can go to the next slide. Just some housekeeping reminders. Today's webinar will be hosted in English and it will also be recorded. So all registrants, anyone who registered or is attending the webinar today, will receive a copy of the recording. I'm also going to walk us through the agenda. So we're kicking things off with introduction. We'll then have a brief overview of different data and tools housed at Global Forest Watch that you can use. Then we'll have our speaker presentations from our amazing panelists, followed by a conclusion and audience Q&A. So we'll have time at the end for questions from you all. You can submit any questions or comments at any time through the Q&A function, which is located in the Zoom navigation menu. So feel free to comment, let us know who you are, where you're calling from, and we'll take questions at the end. And just want to reiterate that the goal of today's webinar is to share the different ways that Global Forest Watch can inspire and strengthen your reporting. And we're hoping you can learn how you can work with our team after the webinar. So I'll walk us through very briefly, for those who may not be familiar, what is Global Forest Watch. I can hit the next bullet. But Global Forest Watch, known as GFW, offers the latest data and cutting-edge technology to empower people everywhere to better protect forests. Our data and tools are free and openly accessible. And here are some high-level examples of how GFW can be used. So it can be used to increase knowledge and transparency about forest landscapes, harness information to mobilize local action by governments and civil society, as well as advance private sector action to stop commodity-driven deforestation and manage forests sustainably. But actually, many of our users include journalists and communications professionals. So therefore, we're excited to share with you all more about how some members from our Global Forest Watch community are helping bring awareness to the state of forests worldwide. Next slide. So I'll introduce our great lineup of speakers. First, I'd love to introduce Caitlin Taylor. She's the communications manager for Global Forest Watch, and she's also the main media contact at GFW. We're also joined by panelists from very respectable organizations in the environmental journalism and reporting field. Ken is a data editor for Environmental Investigations Unit at the Pulitzer Center. We're also joined by Madeline Gunga, who is the Africa editor at the Pulitzer Center, and she was also a Rainforest Investigation Fellow and editor for Info Congo. And also, she was a previous Global Forest Watch Tech Fellow, so we're excited to have her here today and continue to hear more about what she's doing. And then we lastly joined by Willie Schubert. He's the Global Program Director at Mongabay. Mongabay is an environmental news platform that partners very closely with GFW, so we're really excited to share more about how both of our organizations work together. And lastly, I'm Isabella. I'm your moderator for today's webinar. And with that, I'll hand it to Caitlin, who's going to walk us through the many ways that you can use Global Forest Watch in your work.
Great. Thanks so much, Isabella. Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Thayer, and I am the communications manager for Global Forest Watch. I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you to talk a little bit about how you can use Global Forest Watch, or as we call GFW, in your reporting and in your storytelling. Before we turn it over to hear actual stories from our amazing group of panelists, I just wanted to give a quick kind of tour of Global Forest Watch in the hope that everyone will feel a little bit more familiar with our tools and our data and our offer by the end, and also know where you need to come if you need some support. You can go to the next slide. Sweet. So there are 4 main topics I'm going to cover during my presentation. The first is around talking about tree cover. I just want to give a little bit of background on some of the definitions and reasoning behind we use and certain data sets that are very popular. I'm also going to talk about how you can incorporate GFW into a story you're currently working on, and also how you can use GFW to generate a story idea. And last but not least, of course, I want to talk about how you can work with us. So let's dig in. I wanted to take a moment at the top to, again, share a little bit more information about some of the most recognizable and main data sets available on Global Forest Watch, and also some of the most common questions we get. So to kick things off, let's talk about tree cover loss versus deforestation. Global Forest Watch hosts tree cover loss data provided by the University of Maryland's GLAD Lab. And tree cover loss on the site is defined as the complete removal of tree cover for any reason. And this can include loss for both human-caused and natural disturbances, as well as loss that's permanent or temporary. But it's not the same as deforestation, which is just an important caveat to know when using this data for your reporting, kind of in the deforestation realm and beat. Deforestation typically refers to human-caused loss that is permanent removal of natural forest cover. So why do we have tree cover loss data? Well, tree cover is a really convenient metric for monitoring forest change because it's easily measurable from satellite and from space and from satellite imagery. Deforestation, on the other hand, can be difficult to measure with satellite imagery alone because it does refer to permanent change, and it can take time to understand if that loss or that change is permanent. So tree cover loss, we like to think of it as a really valuable first indicator, but just with the understanding that additional verification is necessary to understand if it is actually deforestation. If you can go to the next slide. So you might have also seen that a lot of our communications, we focus on the loss of primary forest. And why is this? Well, what is primary forest? Primary forest is defined as mature rainforest that is especially important for biodiversity, carbon storage, and regulating regional and local climate benefits, and it's really critical for us to protect. The tropics are also where 96% of deforestation occurs. So when we layer tree cover loss data, which is not the same as deforestation as I just covered, over these tropical primary forest areas, we can use that to identify areas of significant loss and get a little bit deeper, and again, kind of understand areas that we need to be paying attention to. We have a lot of, going back just a moment. We have a lot of great resources to dig into these topics a little bit more. I highly recommend the Global Forest Review's Key Definitions page. I think someone's going to pop a link in the chat in a moment, but this digs into these definitions that I just covered and a whole lot more. So definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, so let's dig in, and we can go to the next slide. Great. So I'm sure many of you are working on a piece currently, and I want to talk a little bit about how GFW can support an ongoing story. And one of our first resources on Global Forest Watch at globalforestwatch.org is our dashboard. And on the dashboard, you'll find thousands of charts and graphics and statistics and data analysis on forest for any country in the world. And you can even dig into a really specific regional area or a specific area that you are interested in covering. This example on the screen is just a quick screenshot of a chart you could find. This is of primary forest loss in Bolivia. It's available on the dashboard. And it's kind of a sneak preview at some of the statistics and charts and information that you can find. One quick tip I want to give right at the start, I think this is such a valuable resource, is those 3 dots in the top right corner of that chart. Those are buttons for a variety of links for you to be able to get a shortened link to share that specific chart in an article. There's also an embed link if you want to embed that chart into an article or a piece. And there's also a download button. A lot of our data on the site is available directly for download into a spreadsheet. So definitely recommend checking those out. You can go to the next slide. Oh, there it is. Cool. Another notable resource is our map, and this is probably one of our most well-known resources. I'm a visual learner, and you can use the map to explore data in a more visual format, which I think is really, really key for storytelling and such. And you can also have a clear idea of where forest change is actually happening in the world and within a specific region. We have many layers of data available for you to explore. I'll talk a little bit about those in a bit. But for this slide, I wanted to pull up an example of the US state of Hawaii and specifically the Maui Island. As many of you, I'm sure know, there were some pretty intense fires on the island recently. And this screenshot is actually shows our VIIRS alerts, our fire alerts on the island, and you can really see where exactly those fires were occurring over the month. Similarly, again, hot tip, I want to bring attention to those buttons where you can embed this map into your article, where you can share a shortened link. Sorry, go back a moment. It's not on this screenshot exactly, but if you go to the map in the bottom right corner, you'll find a lot of fun buttons to play around. So you can grab a link to share it, you can change up the settings and such. So just a quick tip. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So third, our team is constantly sharing expert analysis on the data and trying to provide additional explanation on the data and tools that we offer. And you can check out these written analyses on a variety of different editorial channels. The first is the Global Forest Watch blog, which we share more technical explanations of the data, as well as a lot of user stories from users who are using the data in their work. There's also the Global Forest Review. This is a World Resource Institute site and a living online report that's providing the latest information on the state of the world's forests. And a lot of that analysis is powered by data on Global Forest Watch. So definitely recommend checking that out. And I think somebody might put a link in the chat. And then also we have the World Resource Institute's Insights channel. Global Forest Watch sits within WRI. And there's a lot of great expert insights on many different topics, but we feed into a lot of those, and specifically the forest ones. So I definitely recommend you check these out. The links are on your screen, and hopefully they're helpful for your stories. You can go to the next slide. Great. So now I want to talk about how Global Forest Watch can help generate story ideas and dig into some of the specific data sets we offer. The first one I want to talk about is our tree cover loss data set, which I spoke a little bit about at the top, but want to dig in more. So again, we provide annual tree cover loss data provided by the University of Maryland's GLAD Lab. It's one of our most recognized data sets. We do a lot of press outreach around this specific release. You might have seen some earlier this year when we released 2022 tree cover loss data. And we also host a press call. So yeah, this is a great data set. It's one of our main ones in a way. And we really encourage you to use it to look at trends in loss from year to year to kind of figure out insights from there. This specific screenshot, I've actually layered two tree cover loss data sets on top of each other. The first is our tree cover loss due to fires, and the other is just our tree cover loss data set. The fires, I like the title says, it's tree cover loss due to fires, looking at forest fires and trends. And is another great resource for looking at how it changed year over year. You can go to the next slide. Awesome. Now I want to dig into our deforestation alerts, which I know a couple of our panelists are going to dig into as well. Global Forest Watch features an integrated deforestation alerts layer, which really harnesses the power of satellites to detect forest change in near real time across the tropics. If you're interested in writing a story and trying to find an area of interest, these alerts are a great way to identify areas of interest that could prompt further investigation and analysis, and can hopefully help raise awareness of where illegal deforestation might be happening. The example on the screen is a cluster of alerts in Mato Grosso, Brazil, next to a soy plantation, and that I know did spark some investigative journalism. I also think in the chat, someone is going to pop a blog that we wrote about the integrated deforestation alerts if you want to learn more about those. You can go to the next slide. So expanding beyond deforestation alerts, GFW also provides fire alerts, which detect fire activity in near real time, again, helping identify areas of interest that could prompt your further investigation. One section of the GFW dashboard that I want to bring attention to, and that there's a screenshot on the slide right now, is our widget on global regions with the most fire alerts. This is a really great place to start if you're just looking to identify abnormal fire activity that's happening at a country level, at a global level, similarly like the fires in Canada and Greece that we're seeing at the moment. Next slide. Cool. So we also have a lot of contextual data sets available on Global Forest Watch. I've just popped a couple on the screen, but this is not all of them. We have ones on biodiversity, extinction, protected areas, concessions, and Indigenous and community lands. And when these data sets are layered alongside some of our alert data, you can kind of start building a story from there. And again, figuring out areas that might be interesting to investigate further. This particular image on the screen is of a protected area in Cambodia with our integrated deforestation alert layer displayed on top. And I actually know there has been a fair amount of reporting on this particular region from the Mongabay team around those clusters of alerts. So yeah, just kind of an example of how you can put all of these layers together. And next. Great. And finally, I just want to bring attention to our places to watch layer available on Global Forest Watch. This is a layer that our team puts together on a monthly basis. We identify areas of high priority deforestation alerts and then publish them on the map, particularly calling out areas of oil palm and soy expansion. I know Willie from Mongabay will talk a little bit about the partnership that we have with them, but we also provide some of these alert locations to them for their own investigative reporting. But if you are interested in checking out these locations, there's two ways you can do so. One is to go directly onto Global Forest Watch map. All these locations, as well as some of the reporting that Mongabay's done, is publicly available for you to explore and learn about. You can also subscribe to our Places to Watch newsletter. I think somebody's going to put a link to that in the chat, where you can get notified of 10 new oil palm and soy locations each month. And you can also see some of Mongabay's reporting that emerged from the locations that we shared with them. Okay, next slide. So I want to wrap this up because I know everyone's pretty eager to dig into and hear from our speakers and panelists to talk a little bit about how they use Global Forest Watch. But I do quickly want to give a quick overview of how you can work with us, how you can work with me, how you can work with our team. We do interviews. If you'd like to interview someone at Global Forest Watch for a piece, let us know. We do phone interviews, but we also, and sometimes prefer, written interviews on any topic within our expertise. And we can also do interviews on background. So if you'd like information on an area or a data layer, just to kind of get the ball rolling, let us know. We also provide data. We can provide raw data in the form of data spreadsheets. We can essentially send data for anything that doesn't have a data sharing restriction. However, I do want to remind you that a lot of our data is available for direct download directly on the site. If you ever see a little I button next to a data set or a widget, the data is available for there. That's a link to find the data for download. And we also can help with fact checking. So if you are just kind of want to run a statistic by us or something, let us know. We're happy to do so. And if you interviewed one of our experts or one of our teammates, we're happy to review quotes. Of course, always respecting editorial independence. So with all of that in mind, I do want to emphasize that we always really appreciate advance notice. Come to us early for a piece. It just gives us time to prepare and to ensure that we're helping you the best that we can. So yeah, help us help you and come to us early. So that's it for me. I'll pass it back to Isabella in a moment. But again, my name is Caitlin Thayer. I am the main media contact for Global Forest Watch. So if you have any media inquiries or questions, let me know. But hopefully this was a good presentation, or hopefully this helped you kind of become more familiar with the site itself. But if you do have questions, my email is on the screen. So over to you, Isabella. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Caitlin. No, thank you so much for walking us through the many different data and tools that our users can use on Global Forest Watch. It's great to learn about all the different ways that these could support your reporting or communications. And yes, Caitlin's communication contact infos in the chat, including a few other links. Now I'm really excited to hand it over to Madeline to walk us through her work and everything she does with Global Forest Watch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Isabella, for the introduction and also the opportunity to be here during this webinar. I'm Madeleine Gunga. I'm based in Cameroon. I'm an investigative journalist working for Pulitzer Center as Africa editor. Next slide, please. So I've been working as investigative journalist for a couple of years, and I have a long story with the Global Forest Watch tools, starting from the 2019 when I've been Global Forest Watch Tech Fellow and conducting a lot of investigation using Global Forest Watch tools in Cameroon. Then I got 2 years fellowship with the Pulitzer Center and its initiative called Rainforest Investigation Network, where we do collaborative and cross-boundary investigation on rainforest issue using a lot of geospatial tools and also Global Forest Watch tools. So now I'm working as the Pulitzer Center editor, supporting journalists around across Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, to report on rainforest issue, but also other topic. I've also been writing for Info Congo for a couple of years, also working as editor. So the type of topic goes from forest management to policy, agribusiness, and land grabbing. And today I will share with you some of the story we have been producing, investigative reports using geo data analysis, geo reference tools, and Global Forest Watch tools. So I want to go to the first. I have 2 case studies to share with you today. So the first one is about one series of stories on illegal logging in Cameroon that we published just recently in the month of June as part of the fellowship with the Rainforest Investigation Network. So we're 2 journalists working together, collaborating to do this investigation. My colleague from Le Monde called Josiane Quague, and me working for Info Congo. So at the end of a year of fellowship, we observed using many tools that there were an increase of illegal logging, and legal companies who got logging timber were also part of the illegal activity going on. So how did we proceed to be able to do this investigation? We use Global Forest Watch tool to be able to identify some alerts out of the concession, like you see in this slide, for example. The red mark are some deforestation alerts, so like showing that there are change in the forest, that people are, it could be trees that are cut out of the concession. So you will see the green, they are concession, forest concession, and the part that is really white with the red flag, they are places where you have forest change. And we made some investigation, field trip, and observed that there were a lot of tree cuts out of the place or the plot of forest that company are supposed to work on. So Global Forest Watch and its group, the main platform of Global Forest Watch, really help us to locate the tree cover loss out of the concession, logging concession in Cameroon. Next slide, please. So how did we proceed? So in Cameroon and in most of the Congo Basin country and other country, rainforest country, Global Forest Watch has its main platform, but also a national platform called Forest Atlas. And for instance, in Cameroon, we have what we call Cameroon Forest Atlas, which is a national platform giving you an overview of logging title and other land use in Cameroon. So for this investigation, the first challenge was to be able to know which companies are doing logging activities in Cameroon and where they are doing these logging activities. And the Forest Atlas has been really helpful because through the Forest Atlas, this is you have the image of the Forest Atlas here in the slide, where you are able to locate any type of use in the forest. So we focus on logging title. In Cameroon, we have big company working on logging activity, but also other company who can have a logging permit just for 1 year and at least maximum 3-year activity. So our interest was on this specific company working with small time logging title to do their activity. So we didn't have the list of the company who were doing this, who government gave this, to whom government gave this type of logging title. And we went to Forest Atlas and have been able to download the full database because it's an open data portal, so you can go there and download the data and use it for your own purpose, like an investigation. So we got the list from there, and here we also had another challenge. So how to be able to see that this company is working in this specific area. In the database, we're able to locate the region of the title and see in which region in Cameroon we have the most higher volume, high number of logging title for this type of activity, like small logging title, and we observe that it is South Cameroon. These were contextual information that we need to know to better tell the story and to better do the investigation, because you cannot just do investigation without knowing the general context, who is working and where are they working. And this also helped us to locate the area we would like to conduct our investigation, since we found that the South Cameroon was the area or the region with the largest surface area allocated for the small logging operation. We use this as a starting point also to locate where we can go to investigate how these companies are doing their activity, because a lot of reports were saying that companies with this kind of small logging title are involved in illegal activities. So we need to find where we can go for more specific and more relevant finding. Next slide, please. Next slide. So from the Global Forest Watch, the Forest Atlas data, we knew that, okay, the South Cameroon has the highest volume of small logging title. Now, how to be sure that these companies with small logging title are involved in illegal activity or have past record of illegal activities? The Forest Atlas was important, but it was also important to combine with other kind of data, like data hidden into public document. For example, in Cameroon, we have what we call is a record of forest infractions. So anyone who have a bad record in terms of illegal practice when it comes to forest sector, like it could be wildlife trafficking or illegal logging activities, the Ministry of Forest will produce a semestrial report saying that this person, it could be a physical person or a moral person, so a company, that this person is doing this kind of illegal activities. So now that we had the list of companies who got logging title, small logging title, we also use those reports from for the last 6 years. We also try to look at those reports and to be able to see that there were names of company that were in the Forest Atlas that also appear in the forest record of violation. So we combine the Forest Atlas data, like overview of the company involved in small title, with this other report from the Ministry of Forest to find out which company owning small logging title have been convinced of illegal logging or have been proposed suggest or have been convinced of illegal logging by the Ministry of Forest. And we realized that the company with the largest small logging title over the year were also the part of the company who have been convinced of illegal activities in Cameroon. So they were convinced of illegal logging activity because they cut wood out of the limit of their concession. And this is what I explained in the first slide, for example, that there were a lot of logging activity going on outside the concession. So this company with small logging title were also the one who received some, who did some forest crime in this sector. So thanks to the different type of database and the forest atlas, we have been able to match and see the connection between company with logging title and the illegal logging activity. So the fact was that many companies use their logging title just to launder the timber from other area. So we were able to have strong evidence because we had the overview from the forest atlas and we combined with other data, and also field trip that also helped us to compare, to cross-check, to be sure that we have strong evidence. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the second case is an investigation we did the first year of our fellowship as Rainforest Investigation Fellow. So this one was about agro-business, agro-industry and its impact on the forest and the communities. So that year was 2021. There were a lot of reports saying that in the Congo Basin, there are cases of land conversion and it affects communities and also environment. And there were one case going on in Cameroon about one newcomer agribusiness company who got a large tract of forest, or were looking for a large tract of forest, more than 60,000 hectares for his palm oil plantation. So here there were NGOs saying that, okay, this is wrong, there are a lot of failure, a lot of mistake going on, but it was difficult to get evidence showing that there were tree cover loss or there were deforestation going on in this primary forest loss. Let's look at the area. The area is in the South Cameroon and is near a protected area called Campoman, where we have species endangered species like Goria in Cameroon. So it's a really strategic place in terms of conservation. So, and the company were looking for 16,000 hectares just near the protected area called Campoman, and in a place that was former logging concession. So, and people and organization and observer were saying that, okay, the company have started the activity, they have destroyed a lot of forests, but it was difficult to have evidence that this deforestation was actually going on. And it was also difficult to get access to the area because a lot of pressure in the public domain about the topic, and the company also was in a position to stop journalists from working there. So we wanted first to know if there are deforestation in the plot of forest of that former concession, which is here in the slide, the FMU 09025. So we wanted to know if there were deforestation, maybe alert there. Next slide, please. So for the next slide, so we went to Global Forest Watch, but it was difficult to identify the deforestation because we were just like less than 1 year after the beginning of the activity of the company and the complaint of every stakeholder. So we used RAD alert because we could not observe deforestation using the normal Global Forest platform or GLAD alerts, so which is an alert system that can enable you to see that there's something going on in the forest. So due to cloud and also we could not observe it. So we use GLAD alerts to have weekly data and to better monitor the deforestation over the time within that concession. And it was really helpful because that RAD alert, which is also integrated in Global Forest Watch platform, help you to have a high resolution imagery that can show the forest loss within a plot of forest, and it's not affected usually by cloud cover. So this was the first step, to have evidence that there are disturbance in the forest. Then from that RAD alert, we moved to the planet imageries, to be able to get like really high resolution image and compare different time frame to establish whether there were disturbance and when it happened and in the forest. And as you can see in the image, we try to compare trade time and observe that the first time the forest was normal, no disturbance. In December 2020, there were disturbance in the forest. And now the last image, we saw that there were plot of palm or plantation. This has been helpful thanks to this planet imagery, which is also integrated in Global Forest Watch, but it's possible to have using other ways, other platform like Planet itself, to get the data, the high resolution imagery data, thanks to the network we're working on. Next slide, please. So we also combine this first data with the data from the field. Now that we were sure that there were deforestation or alerts in the forest or forest change in the area, we plan our field trip and have been able to visit the community surrounding the area and also surrounding the national park. And the community complain about the impact of this deforestation. So their activities like the elephant was destroying their plantation. We took mark of the destruction, and we combine it with other data from some reports, diverse reports showing that there were tracks of elephant habitat in surrounding the area or the plot of forest that has been destroyed for the palm or plantation. So we combine diverse source like this and with the satellite imageries to be able to explain what was going on in the field in the moment that it was difficult for everyone to have access to the area. Next slide, please. So I just want to share one of the impact we have been we received so far from our use of data and satellite imageries in the story. It's a recent case from our last series on illegal logging in Cameroon. So we published the story in June. We started publication in June 8th, and just less than 1 week after the publication of the story, the Ministry of Forest in Cameroon responded, and it reacted and sent confirmed that there were, he got information that there were a lot of illegal logging being transported around the country, and he asked to his representative in the region to reinforce the control so that we should not have a lot of illegal timber being transported across the country. So I think this is one of the first time in Cameroon, or the rare moment in Cameroon, when you will have government not complaining about an investigation by journalists, by outlets, but confirming that what journalists raised was actually right, and take some measure to mitigate. So I think it's all. Thank you so much. And just to share that we also do have some trainings since I've been Global Forest Watch Tech Fellow a couple of years ago. I tried to lead some training for African journalists in Cameroon, in Congo Basin, in other countries, to use satellite imagery to better report on environmental challenge. And I also work with the Pulitzer Center in the same line with journalists around Africa. Thank you so much, and looking forward for your questions.
Thanks so much, Madeline. Yes, I also dropped the user guide, the Global Forest Watch user guide that Madeline produced as part of her tech fellowship. So definitely check that out. And great to hear how you've been able to further build the capacity of other journalists to use GFW through your trainings. Now I'll hand it to Willie Schubert from Mongabay to walk us through his presentation.
Thanks so much, Isabella. So yeah, today I'm going to be going through, I think, some of the things that Caitlin alluded to about the differences between tree cover loss and deforestation. And our goal here at Mongabay is to be chasing deforestation and finding those examples of deforestation within all of this tree cover loss data. And so, in collaboration with GFW, we've been using these near real-time satellite alerts to inspire the journalism that we do and reveal stories that are within that data. So I'm going to give just a bit of background first. We can go to the next slide. About Mongabay. So Mongabay, we're a nonprofit independent newsroom. We're dedicated to reporting on environmental issues. We got our start focused on tropical rainforests and have since grown to cover issues globally. This is our little mascot. It's called the pygmy tyrant. It's a bird from Costa Rica. We can keep going. And so right now, there is a mass proliferation of satellites going up into space and looking at the Earth. I mean, over the past few years that we've been involved in this space, this number of active satellites keeps going up, and they're capable of doing more things than just taking pictures. But I think you can conceptualize this as, take a look at the next slide in a journalism context. There's a scrum, there's a million cameras all looking at the Earth every day, taking pictures and trying to, get the visuals that can support the stories. And so what I'm here to talk about today is how to harness this mass amount of information that's being generated, this huge expansion of data in order to tell stories. And I think one of the key things that we're going to go through first is how to filter out the noise. And so we get this real-time data, but we're using an algorithm that identifies particularly concerning locations of tree cover loss. Notice I said tree cover loss and not deforestation at this point, because that is something that merits investigation. So we can keep going. So using that data, what we're doing once we get these alerts is we're responding to them by investigating causes. This is, maybe high tech in a lot of ways, but the methods are still very core to journalism. We find out where something is happening immediately, but we don't know why it's happening or who's doing it or how. And so that on the ground investigation, that combination of data and journalists and on the ground reporting is what chasing deforestation or forest tracking means for Mongabay. And we can keep going. I'm going to give you some examples about the algorithm for one. So why do we need it? And this gets a little bit to my point earlier about how many satellites there are and how much data there is. There's literally millions of places every month that have alerts associated with them. And if you look at, that data on GFW, there are, it can be kind of overwhelming. And you have to get down to a much more local level for that data to become meaningful. And so what we do is kind of divide the world up into little boxes, little squares. And we see if those alerts are occurring in a protected area or an intact landscape. So this is kind of like the primary forest example that Caitlin was talking about. And we use protected areas because we can be pretty reasonably confident that deforestation or that tree cover loss shouldn't be happening in that location. There is some measure of conservation. And so if you identify all these alerts, you put them through some of these filters, you calculate what's called an importance score. We can keep going. And so you take the importance score of the land, you say, okay, this is the land that we're saying is important. How many alerts happened in that land? And you multiply that, and then we use that to identify a list of top locations where there are the most. I think here we're looking at, some in Peru in a close-up view, but this process is happening really all throughout the tropics. And Annika is, able to talk a little bit about that. She's pivotal in creating these integrated alerts. And Madeline was also talking about using some of this alert data. This is how we use it. And that's kind of behind the scenes. But what's public, if you go to the next slide, Pavel, is this kind of curation on places to watch section of GFW. There's this little button called Explore, and that brings you to the Mongabay stories that we've done. We're looking at Bolivia here for a reason. I wanted to, so what we're looking at is this alerts data in this location with the places to watch overlay. Something that I wanted to point out, just as a tip or trick, you can see that there are these palm oil alerts that are also here, that there's likely expansion beyond concession boundaries of palm oil plantations. And so that methodology that I just shared about how do you define what's important in all of this information, it doesn't have to be just conservation areas. And I think there's a lot of motivation and push to prioritize different things for how the algorithm works. And this is also public. You can go and say, hey, I want to see this, and it's unreported in news media. So yes, you can get the newsletters, but there's also this publicly accessible information already about both oil palm expansion and soy around the world. So we're going to dig in. We're going to stick in Bolivia. Let's stay in Bolivia, and I want to share some examples of individual stories that we've done over the past few years. And, as we've been looking at this data all the time, searching for stories, Mongabay and others have identified, a new driver of deforestation in Latin America in its expansion of Mennonite communities. That's a, Christian religious minority that is setting up colonies all throughout Latin America. And, we were able to pick out some of the pattern of this deforestation and see that it was pressing and a big issue. But, how do we tell the story on the ground and identify, characters in what are often very insular, you could say secretive communities, but certainly not interacting very frequently with the outside world. So there's a few ways that we can get at this, and you can go to the next slide. So one is that the satellite data helps us identify some kind of key event. And so, this was a story that we did that was very small, short story about a new bridge that had just been built that allowed easier access to this area of agricultural expansion in this buffer zone and sometimes within a national park. And so this is really cool. It, helped us identify, all right, this thing is happening. This is a trigger event that may lead to more deforestation happening. And, there's evidence there. People can see the satellite image, but, people feel stories. People interact, more with narrative than they do with data. And so this was kind of an example of just getting a tip in satellite information that informs us to say, hey, something is likely to be occurring here. So you can go to the next slide, Pavel. So what did we do after we figured out that this bridge had been made? And just so you know, we did report as a story, a small story. Hey, there's a new bridge that's crossing the river to connect to this colony. And so we mobilized a reporting team to go visit. And you can see one of these farmers in his horse cart and go talk to them. And go not just talk to them, but talk to their neighbors and talk to the government officials and find out if this was allowed. And oftentimes it's not allowed. This is illegal deforestation that's occurring, without permission. And so you can keep going to the next one. So, that's one story. It's a smaller story in a way about this community in Bolivia and this Mennonite colony and the indigenous people that are kind of having their land encroached upon. But, that's a small example of something that's actually much bigger. And so for us, we use this data from GFW, but also in collaboration with some academics in Canada, to put this data into context, to see what's the scope and the scale. And it's actually somewhat easy to identify this pattern of deforestation from space because it follows some pretty consistent, it has some consistent characteristics. And so we use that satellite imagery to discover multiple patterns in multiple locations and try and show the footprint of all of these colonies. And what we ended up discovering was that the amount of land that these Mennonites are covering in Latin America is the same size as the country of the Netherlands. So they've essentially established a pointillist country throughout Latin America that is connected through their religion. We can keep going. And so there's a lot of complexity in this story. And there's a lot of people and a lot of history. And so, we've increasingly focused on video journalism that kind of brings that on the ground piece in combination with the satellite information, but also that historical context and how this pattern has been happening, for 500 years and is still happening today. And so, I'll put the playlist of the videos that we've been putting together into the chat. I think I can post it to everyone here. But I encourage people to check out these videos because these stories are not simple ones, and they involve, governments, companies, and communities, and academic groups and researchers, and it takes a tremendous amount of collaboration to really bring these stories together. And so, that's one of the key reasons why, as a media outlet, we do partner with Global Forest Watch, because of that complexity, because of that challenge that we're facing to tell these stories. And I think with that, I can probably close it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Willie. Really powerful stories. And thank you so much for sharing more about how we work together with Global Forest Watch and really the impact of places to watch. Great presentation. I'll now hand off to Ken to walk us through his work.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Hi, everyone. My name is King. I'm the data editor at the Pulitzer Center. So my responsibilities at Pulitzer Center is, mainly to support our fellows, who are journalists, investigative journalists, on their investigations focusing on rainforest. I guess I'll be showing this story that I'll be sharing using GFW data is the simplest, among all the stories today. Let's go to the next slide. So it is about this story that is not really in a tropical rainforest, but this is in the British Columbia in Canada. So this story, it is presented as a documentary by CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company. And it is a documentary about the wood pellet produced by logging the primary forest in British Columbia, Canada, and exported it to the UK and other Asian countries as wood pellet for energy production. So basically, you are burning the wood pellet to generate electricity. And this is labeled, or this is considered as renewable energy because after you chop down the trees, you still can grow them. But a lot of environmental activists argue that this is actually not a solution to the climate crisis because it takes decades or even hundreds of years for the forest to regenerate. And also burning the woods, release more carbon into the atmosphere. So next slide. Okay, I would like to show you a video, which is two footages from the documentary. Before I go further, let's play the video.
This is what forests around Quesnel looked like from space 2 decades ago. Look what happens after a pine beetle outbreak infected the trees. The BC government allowed logging to ramp way up to get rid of all those dead trees.
Right, so you can see the first footage that it is showing you the satellite imagery, which is again showing you how clear cutting of primary forest in a area called Quesnel in the British Columbia. Let's go to the second footage. Can we play the second video?
It takes just a few minutes in an airplane above this province to really see what's happened over decades here. And it's gross.
Right. So these are...
We're on our way to a
we can start
clear-cut
the video here.
location, and it's been linked to the company that is selling wood pellets to Europe.
We can stop the video here. Thank you. We can go back to the slides. So you can see these two footages, right, using satellite imagery in the documentary to show how bad is the primary forest in British Columbia, how it was removed. And you can see those are like clear cutting. So these are part of the very shocking images that are included in the documentary. However, the question here is that, how did we find those footages? Okay, that was a challenge that was given to me by the two Canadian journalists, right? They are our Rainforest Investigation Network fellows, just like Madeline, and I am the data editor. So I need to figure out a way to find deforestation hotspots in British Columbia, so that they are able to get this stunning, and shocking footages for their documentary. Next slide, please. However, if you know where is British Columbia, you know that it is huge. Okay, it is 4 times the size of United Kingdom. It is almost 1 million kilometers square. It's really huge. So if I just randomly look at the this state and try to identify deforestation hotspot using satellite imagery, That would be crazy. Okay, I agree that probably a algorithm, a machine learning algorithm could do the work much faster, and it is possible. But we don't have the resources to build a algorithm just to perform these tasks. So I was thinking that, all right, I need to narrow down my area to focus on areas where deforestation took place. And this is where the data of Global Forest Watch came in, right? So next slide, please. So what I did was I went to the Global Forest Watch interactive map, and I searched for British Columbia. And you can see that, from the statistics on the left panel, it says that, from 2001 to 2022, it has lost, 8.95 million hectares of tree cover. All right. So we know that a lot of forest has been removed, has been lost in British Columbia. And a lot of that was because of clear cutting to produce wood pellet for energy production in the UK and in other Asian countries, which is the subject of this documentary. So now I use the tree cover loss data. Next slide, please. And now I was able to narrow down my area, like where should I look at, to locate the deforestation hotspots. And I can use the filter, the filter slider, on the left panel, right, to focus on a specific period based on, what a journalist has found by talking to experts, by doing local reporting. They were interested in certain time. So I can look at the data just within that time frame. Next, please. And using that, using GFW, I was able to really focus on several hotspots that, the data show me that deforestation was rampant, as you can see in this area. Almost like the whole area has been deforested. Okay, maybe not deforestation, right? But tree cover loss happened in this whole area. So once I identify a few locations, then I can share with the journalists. They then do on-the-ground reporting to verify whether this is a tree cover loss caused by other factors, or these are real deforestation. And once we identify the hotspots, we then go back to our satellite imagery platform, which is the Planet Explorer, to locate the satellite imagery for the past 10, 20 years, and create the animation, to show how the forest has been clear cut over the years. So this is how we are able to identify the locations. And then from the locations, we identify the footages to be included in the documentary, right? So this is not rocket science, nothing very complex. But for a documentary, these footages are extremely important because we want to show the audience, right, how this happened over the years. And British Columbia is not somewhere that you always travel to. It is not easy to go to that area, especially deep in the forest. Right. So these are some of the locations that we identify, and then we share with the journalists, and they do their verification on the ground. Next slide, please. And just to share with you, this documentary produced by CBC News has won the Environmental and Climate Change Award, which is the Gold Award, which is the highest in that category by the Canadian Association of Journalists for this year. So this is one of the impacts that we achieve through this documentary. I think the documentary the link has been dropped in the chat box. So there's a text version of the story. There's also a documentary version. It's not a very long documentary. I think it's less than 1 hour. So I really encourage you to have a look. It is quite good. All right, next. I have 30 seconds left. Okay, very quickly, just to introduce you to the project that I have been focusing at Pulitzer Center, which is the Rainforest Investigation Network. Madeline, the other speakers we had just now, Madeline, she is one of the fellows in 2021 and 2022. And this is a 1-year-long fellowship. We recruit about a dozen of journalists so that they're able to dedicate 1 whole year to look into 1 or 2 major investigations. Yeah, that's my alarm. 1 or 2 investigations in tropical rainforest areas. So far we have, these are some of the achievement of some of the stats that we have achieved. And we usually open up the application by year end. So watch that out on our website. And if you're interested, feel free to email me and contact me, and we can discuss further. Thank you.
Thanks, Kang. Right on time. Thank you for sharing really powerful documentary, which I shared the link to in the chat, as well as some other toolkits and resources you can use at the Pulitzer Center. So thanks so much for walking through that. I'll now hand it to Caitlin to give us some concluding remarks before we open it up for the Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. This is such a treat for me, too. I think some of our panelists might have heard me say, I love to hear like the story behind the story. So getting to hear that full process kind of from start to finish and where data came into play is such a treat for me. And I hope everyone in attendance was able to learn a little bit. If you could go to the next slide, I just wanted to wrap this up with a quick slide on how you can stay in touch with Global Forest Watch and us. We'll also have a slide at the end with all of our panelists' contact information in case you want to reach out to them directly. But how to stay in touch with Global Forest Watch. We have a monthly newsletter where we can recap what's going on in our world. And new data sets, new user stories, everything. This is different than the Places to Watch newsletter I mentioned earlier, but somebody I think is going to post the subscription link in the chat in a moment. You can also follow us on social media at Global Forests. And there was a question that came in around tutorials and resources. I highly recommend checking out the Global Forest Watch Help Center on our website. Isabella is the main point of contact for the Help Center, and there you can find lots of resources, tutorials, webinars, trainings, information about upcoming office hours. So that's a fantastic resource one I really recommend checking out. And then at the end of this webinar, we will have a quick survey. We're hoping, this is just the start. We want to stay in touch. We want to learn what's most helpful for you and your work. So really encourage you all complete that. And yeah, again, my name is Caitlin, and I am the media contact for Global Forest Watch. So if you have any specific media inquiries or stories you would like to discuss, please get in touch. I think during the Q&A, we're going to open up for a bunch of questions. If you do have a question about a specific story, we're not going to dig into that right this moment during this webinar, but happy to discuss at a later date. So just feel free to get in touch. I'll end there and pass it over to you, Isabella, for some Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. And just to reemphasize what Caitlin said, we're going to be taking very, general questions about the different tools that were covered, any questions about the presentations or use cases for the speakers. We're not going to go to in the nitty-gritty technical side of the data. We may have a future webinar going through more of a deep dive training on how to use the data, but today we just wanted to give you a preview of how you can use Global Forest Watch in your work. So feel free to ask any general questions of what that could look like in your storytelling, communications, reporting. If you have any questions about lessons learned or best practices, we have our experts with us today. So if we can go to the next slide. Also just want to invite another presenter, Annika Berger. She's a research analyst at Global Forest Watch. She's also done trainings and webinars for journalists. So we're so happy to have her here to answer any questions you may have a bit more about the data side. And already we received some questions before the webinar, so thank you for those who've sent some questions. But the ones we received so far in the Q&A, I'll start with Helen asked this great question about, her interest in how do you teach this in a classroom setting for undergraduates when it comes to forest storytelling, and just what other activities or curriculum can help complement this. As Caitlin mentioned, you can find tutorials on Global Forest Watch, but I wanted to invite our panelists to talk a bit about what they use as far as resources and other trainings that might be of interest. But Madeline, would you like to tell us a bit about some of the trainings you've done, if you've worked with students, and just kind of like what resources you use?
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. In terms of work with undergraduates, I will present not really undergraduate, but journalists who are at the intersection of learning the data, who don't have knowledge about data, but doing storytelling, doing investigation, or just reports, so little report on environmental issue. What we usually do is, like, before the training, try to leverage the level of their knowledge on data journalism or storytelling, and what are their needs. So we have some little question that we send before the training. And during the training, we usually use the Global Forest Watch guide that we share on the chat. So either you can decide to explain to show to the student or to the journalist how to use the dashboard of Global Forest Watch, the dashboard platform, or the map of Global Forest platform. So from the beginning we start with just simple information, understanding the environmental challenge and where the data can come in to explain or to better tell the story. So since there are people who don't have experience in using data or working with data, the first thing we usually do is to assess their understanding, but to help them to better understand simple environmental challenge before going on a specific issue of using data. This can help us to be really connected to environmental issue and see how the data can help them to improve the story they are telling. So this is what I can say, and I'm sure that other panelists would add more interesting insight on it. Thank you.
Definitely. I'll open to other panelists. Ken, I know you talked about some of the resources and we shared that toolkit. Anything you'd like to add to what Madeline kind of expanded on?
The one very useful data set I think not many people notice is the soil planted area data set. The map you can, I think the GFW interactive map, you're able to check, whether a location has been planted with soil. And not only that, you're able to know when that happened, like when it appears. So there's a filter slider. And why is that important? Because this is, it is very useful when you're trying to work on, let's say, whether a soybean plantations have violated the soy moratorium, right? The soy moratorium is the agreement, moratorium agreed by all the leading soy producers that, they can't buy soy from any deforested area that have been converted into soybean after 2008. So using that, we were, some of our investigations projects were able to check, whether a certain plantation was started, before 2008 or after 2008 to establish whether it violated the moratorium. So I think that is one data set that is, very useful. But just to be careful is that just remember to read all the descriptions and the fine notes about that data set, because I think there are some limitations, right? So always understand your data before using it. Yeah.
Great point. To read any information background, especially with all the data accessible. And I saw we have a question about, the credibility and methodology about our data, which we'll talk a bit more about in a bit, but also wanted to give Willie a chance if there's anything you wanted to add in terms of resources that you use when it comes to preparing for your story, or how you best use Global Forest Watch.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that we haven't touched on quite yet, but I think is useful to mention, is the planet satellite imagery as well, because data is an abstraction. It's, we see a lot of pink in these presentations, and that's the representation of these tree cover loss data set. But, I think as King's example was showing, that type of visual imagery that you can see in a satellite view is really important. And so those planet data layer that is often shown as like a checkbox at the bottom of the legend is a way to kind of get an immediate kind of visual understanding about what's happening, and you can do some kind of timeline views there as well. So I would definitely say, the planet data is a very important resource. The other thing that, I actually don't want to share it right now because we have to make some updates, because there's been a lot of, the integrated alerts data is just launched this year. And so we do have an internal tool for making maps very quickly, exporting as images, PNG files, and animated GIFs that it is publicly accessible, but it will be rolling out more communication later this year about the tools that we use internally to make maps, building off of both Global Forest Watch data, but also some of the sister platforms that WRI maintains.
Excellent. Thank you, Willie. Yes, I think it's really interesting to know more about like how you can use our data, but how is that paired with different visualizations like the planet imagery. We shared some of that in the chat, which you can also access on Global Forest Watch. Happy to share more resources if you have questions around that. And just to go through some of the other questions we received, yes, a question about how accurate and up to date is the data, which is a great question. I'll hand it to Annika if you'd like to speak to this one.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And this is a perfect segue from what King just mentioned about understanding your data and making sure to read the description. So on Global Forest Watch, every data set that we have has a metadata button available. So if you look and you see a little circle with an I in it, that lists the metadata about the data set, when it was last updated, and we'll link to the scientific paper that would say the accuracy for any given data set. So I'm not sure which data set you were curious about, but between the tree cover loss data and the integrated alerts data set, the accuracies are listed in the respective papers for the individual data products. But specifically, the annual tree cover loss data is updated yearly. And because it takes time to process the entirety of the spatial satellite imagery for generating tree cover loss data, that is released sometime in the spring in the following year. And we have a big release around the annual data when it is made available by our data provider, University of Maryland. And for the integrated deforestation alerts data set, that's our near real-time data set on detecting forest disturbances on a sub-weekly basis. So we have 3 different data streams for the alerts, and so we get updates a lot more frequently through that layer. And it's updated every day, taking in new information. But each individual alert system has its own cadence of when it gets a look at the planet from when the satellites pass over and when we can potentially detect change. So I'd suggest taking a look at the blog about the integrated alert layer, and we have other information about the accuracy of the tree cover loss data as well. But thank you for the question. I also see there was a question about downloading shape files or images, and we do provide download links to certain data sets. I'd also check in that same metadata area by clicking the I button next to a data set. there may be a button at the bottom that says download data. So it will bring you to the source data site for any given data set. Or we have our open data portal where we provide download link options for our data sets. But if there's something that you see is not available, like we don't have the tree cover loss available as a shapefile currently, we recommend that you reach out to us and you explain your use case and why that would be beneficial to your work, because the more interest that we have in any feature or functionality in the website, the better case that we have to make improvements to the website. And we're constantly taking in feedback from users. And we really appreciate when folks reach out to us and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and it would be great to have this feature. And then we can, we can store that in our database of requests, and we're constantly making improvements to the website. So thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Thanks, Annika. It's great to hear, to walk us through that, especially for those maybe learning about the data for the first time. I also saw Kang, did you have your hand up? Do you have anything you also want to add to that?
Yes, just to add on that is that, I know a lot of people, including the journalists I work with, have been asking about the accuracy of the tree cover loss. So to confirm that, I'm not saying that the data is not accurate, right? I'm just saying that to double check that, you can always refer to satellite imagery. I think that is a good approach. Look at the latest satellite imagery to see, whether what happened to that location, right? If that location is identified as, there is tree cover loss in that location, and you want to know what is happening, of course, the best way is to visit the area. But if you can't do that, satellite imagery is a way to help you. And I just shared the link that, to the Planet Explorer platform. If you use that link, you're able to create a free account, which is funded by the Norwegian government. And through that, you're able to access monthly mosaic or monthly satellite imagery of all tropical rainforest areas. So that will allow you to look at least, monthly imagery to verify, what you're looking at on GFW. Yeah.
And I also want to see if any of our other speakers had anything to add related to this question about the role of data, accuracy, transparency along those lines.
Yeah, I could say a couple things. I mean, for us, there's often, it is about the definition of what is deforestation versus tree cover loss. And there is, so accuracy kind of depends on who you ask. I think what GFW provides with some of the ability to say, I only am interested in deforestation with, it's by percentage of canopy cover and things like that. So you're able to kind of change the numbers yourself as well, based upon the criteria that you set. So some of that is in your hands as a reporter. So I think that's why, looking at that methodology of how things were created is, really key. But then also in certain countries, like Indonesia, for example, that also maintains its own systems and publishes it, as do the Brazilian government. It's useful to actually use more than one platform. There isn't just GFW in existence. In Brazil, they have the Brazilian Space Agency puts out information and statistics on a monthly basis as well. And so sometimes it's, you got to use more than one source.
Very interesting point. I mean, there's so much data available out there. There's many instances where you'll see that our panels will use different types of data reference, even sometimes with country data. So in the world of data, it's interesting to understand the nuances of each, and I hope we can make it clear at least what we offer at GFW. I saw we had a question about the planet imagery and just a bit more to learn if that's free and accessible to utilize under Creative Commons 4.0. I'll hand it to Annika to talk about this. as I think is a really helpful tool for journalists.
Yes, I agree. The Planet high resolution satellite imagery that we have available on the website is it's accessible visually, but not the individual images are not downloadable through our website. We have a partnership with the NICFI program and the and Planet that make those monthly composited images available, and so we're able to host them for open use and essentially. But the NICFI program has different levels of access to the Planet data. So if a group has a strong case for accessing the like daily satellite images that Planet is taking, then groups can request access through their NICFI program to be able to download those individual scenes. So we don't currently offer the download for those individual scenes or for downloading the monthly composites, but you can visually use Planet to support like through Global Forest Watch by sharing a link to the map, which has Planet displayed, underneath data layers, and embedding maps in articles, and that's fine to do.
Great. Thanks, Annika, for that explainer. And I'm so sorry we've reached time, but I understand we didn't get a chance to go through everyone's questions, but please email us at gfw@deborah.org. I'll also drop Caitlin's email and all the emails from the panelists if we didn't have time for your questions today. But I just want to end with one question for all panelists. This question was for Madeline. Just wanted to learn more about how folks can come together and work with you all as a global community for wider impact. But I thought this would be a great question for all panelists to speak to. But Madeline, would you like to start first? And then I'll hand it to Kang and Willie to address as a final note.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think when it comes to working with data, it's always good to collaborate with other. Collaboration is the key. And this is what we have been doing the couple of years. So collaborating with people who know how to use the data also help us to empower our capacity of working with data. So in the Congo Basin or in Africa, for instance, we are open to suggestions, to way to collaborate. We have been doing a lot of training for journalists, and we are still open to other opportunities to create a strong community of journalists that can use these satellite imagery data and Global Forest Watch tool to do their investigations. So I think this is a good suggestion, a good question also, and we are open to our contact are there. You can also contact us to know more or to see how we can help building the capacity.
Thanks, Madeline. Really appreciate any on that note. Ken, would you also like to speak to this?
Yeah, I remember one presentation by Global Forest Watch at the Land and Carbon Summit this year, is that for data to be impactful, you need partnership. And that is what I really learned in the past 3 years of running the Rainforest Investigation Network, right? Because as a journalist, as a researcher, right, it is not possible for you to learn all the different resources and technical tools and skills and knowledge out there. So in this case, always seek partnerships with the experts, like GFW, like Planet Explorer, right? Once you reach out, you will find that a lot of these people, they are really happy to help you because they want their data to create impact. And journalists is the medium that can help to make that impact happen. So just like this webinar, don't be afraid to reach out and be patient because they get a lot of requests. and work out a partnership with these organizations to assist with the reporting and investigations.
Thanks, Willie. Yes, we have a very large community, but we wish we could talk to everyone, but that's what we have webinars like today to hear and get a chance to speak to as many people as we can at once. I'll now hand it to Willie to also answer this question.
Yeah, sure. So I think for the journalists who are amongst us today, I mean, one way that we can all collaborate and work together, we accept pitches for story ideas. And so you can find that on mongabay.org. I just posted the link. And there are ways that, if you have a story idea and you want to be paid for it, that is one way to go about it. I think, on Keng's point about the kind of partnership piece, that yes, it is really key to work together because there's different domain knowledge, and journalists are generalists in many ways. But for beyond the journalism group, it's really about the use of the information. And so we find that collaboration, it does take, okay, well, what happened after that story was published about the wood pellets, for example? Yeah, it won an award, but did that change anything? Did it get used by government? Did it get used by private sector? And I shared a link earlier about one of the stories we did similarly on wood pellets, and the fact that they were being subsidized by the EU and creating this incentive to chop down forests for energy. And a lot of that is based on fraud. And we found out that our story was used in parliamentary proceedings to decide to stop those subsidies. And so I think as a journalism sector, as we reach out and think about these partnerships with others, we really need to focus on how this information that we're producing is being used, by who and for what purpose. So I feel like that's kind of at the key thing for collaboration, because for us, we just put the information out there and see what happens afterwards. That's kind of our default position in journalism. But I think we need to pay a lot more attention to how people use the information that we put out in the world.
Absolutely. Such a strong note to end on, that we can have all the data in the world accessible, but we really want to track the impact, and these stories, like several that our speakers mentioned today, really help draw awareness of the state of forests worldwide and help raise awareness to hopefully ending illegal deforestation. We can go to the next slide. I know we're over time, and just want to thank you all for your questions and participation in our webinar today. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking the time to walk us through all of your work. I hope you all are left very inspired, and please get in touch. I've included everyone's contact information in the chat as well as on this slide. Everyone will receive a recording from today's webinar, as well as other resources and materials that we mentioned today. So one final reminder to please complete our webinar survey. We're hoping to produce future webinars as part of a series for data journalists. We want to hear from you. Was this helpful? What other topics would you like us to talk about in the future? So please, your feedback's very valuable. Well, thanks again. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye. See you next time.
Thank you all.